Hello everyone again. I hope you all are having a great week. First of all, I would like to thank you all for showing your interest in this webinar. This is Himanshu, an automation engineer from BugRaptors. I have around 3+ years of experience in web automation and 1+ years in API automation. My experience in automation testing likely involves designing, implementing, and maintaining automated test scripts and test frameworks with different tools and technologies. Since testing nowadays has become a key ingredient to digital success, I and Misut, our guest contributor from Indeed.com, will make sure this session helps you explore all the details of the term testing as a service. So, we will discuss a little bit about testing as a service and a key problem in it. And for the same, we have here with us Mr. Mesut Durukal, the test automation engineer. I welcome you on board with us. Please tell us something about yourself.
Sure. Hi, Himanshu. Thanks a lot. And thanks for inviting me as well. I believe today we will have a great session. And hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. Thanks for joining us. Just a little bit self-introduction. My name is Mesut, and I'm originally from Turkey, but I'm based in Japan. I'm living here for more than 2 years. And I'm a test automation engineer, just as yourself, Himanshu. And of course, we are performing lots of different quality assurance activities. But nowadays, test automation is a very important part of the whole quality assurance lifecycle. And I believe today we will a little bit talk about test automation and different ways to improve the efficiency. Maybe one way to do that is providing the service, testing service to people and reducing the duplication or different waste of time and efforts. So again, I believe it will be a great session, and we are, of course, waiting for the interactions with the audience as well. If there are any questions or other discussions, we would be happy to discuss them. Thanks again.
Perfect, perfect. So it sounds like you have a lot of valuable skill and knowledge to bring to the table today for
Thank
our audience. So continuing now, I would like to talk about testing as a service. In software engineering, as we all know, testing is a crucial aspect of software development that ensures the software meets the requirements and functions correctly. It is a process of identifying defects, error, and bugs in software application and fixing them before releasing the software to the end users. So in the past, software development companies used to rely on in-house testing teams to ensure the quality of their software. However, with the increasing complexity and scale of software systems, traditional testing methods are no longer sufficient. So this is where testing as a service comes into the picture. So it is a cloud-based testing service that enables companies to outsource their testing activities to third-party service providers. These providers offers a range of testing services, including functional testing, performance testing, security testing, and more. With it, company can access a range of testing tools and resources without having to invest in expensive hardware and software. So overall, testing as a service is a valuable solution for companies looking to improve their software testing process by leveraging a cloud-based testing services. Company can access a range of testing tools and resources while saving on cost and improving the quality of their software. So now the question is there any demand of testing in market in real? So the answer is yes. The market demand for testing as a service is increasing rapidly as more and more organizations are moving their operation to the cloud. It offers a cost-effective and flexible solution for software testing that allows organizations to quickly and easily access testing resources without the need for the in-house expertise or infrastructure. So talking about the recent survey of 2021, software testing market size valued 40 billion USD in 2021, and it is anticipated a record a CAGR of more than 6% between 2022 to 2030. So it is already expected to continue to grow as more organizations realize the benefit of this approach to software testing and as the complexity of the software application continues to increase. So now we're going to take a quick look on types of testing. So the testing is generally divided in two parts, functional testing and non-functional testing. So talking about the functional testing, a type of testing that focuses on ensuring that an application or system functions as expected and meets the specified requirements. Test cases are designed to simulate real-world scenarios and test the application's functionality in different situations. The testing process involves executing these test cases and comparing the actual results against the expected results, like unit testing, component testing, regression testing, sanity, smoke, and so more. And if we talk about the non-functional testing, it's a type of testing that focuses on verifying the performance, usability, reliability, and other non-functional aspect of an application or system. Unlike functional testing, non-functional testing doesn't verify the application specific features or functionalities, but rather it's perform behavior and other non-functional aspects. It covers a wide range of testing types, including performance testing, load testing, stress testing, security testing, and so more. These testing types are designed to evaluate how well an application or systems performs under different non-functional conditions, such as high user loads, limited resources, or unexpected situation. So this is about the type of testing. So moving forward, I would like to ask Mesut, what do you think about the role of test automation and a key problem in it?
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu, for explaining this. Uh, I will go into that, but I just realized there's a question in the chat. So let's
Yeah,
go over that and then we can continue. I think they're asking which one is more important. Since you just explained the functional and
yeah.
the non-functional testing types, they're asking which one is more important, the functional or the non-functional tests.
So according to me, functional and non-functional testing covers different aspect of software system and should be both used for the quality assurance. Now, what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I totally agree because we generally tend to start with functional testing because non-functional testing requires a lot of special skills like performing a security testing, accessibility testing, usability, all kinds of non-functional tests is not easy. And most probably the functionality is our first priority, so we start with that. But that being said, it doesn't mean that we can totally ignore non-functional testing. So it is as important as functional testing as well, I believe. So of course, both of them are very important, but of course it will depend on our requirements. Like we can start with the highest priority tasks, but eventually, of course, we should cover all the aspects of the quality, which is the functional and the non-functional aspects, just as you said, Himanshu. So moving on the question that you asked. So first of all, you shared that there is still a need for testing. You shared the market demand, and then you shared the types of testing. So the need for testing is obvious because this is a hot topic nowadays, right? Everyone is discussing if robots or machines can replace us, to replace testers, if we can eliminate the testing teams. So we can say it is not possible, right? Because especially from the second group of testing types, the non-functional types. Since we are talking about usability, user friendliness, as the name suggests, we are talking about users. We are talking about human factor. So of course we can automate some scripts to verify and validate some expectations, but we cannot do that purely solely with automation to judge the user satisfaction, how they feel about using this product, or how the like you can, for example, verify a pop-up window and error message, but you cannot verify how understandable it is, or what kind of accuracy the message has to the users. So testing is, of course, the need for testing is obvious. And I believe the need for test automation is also obvious, because nowadays we are not having seasonal or big releases. Every day we are delivering a new release. Like every day we are doing lots of different changes in our code repository, and we are pushing these codes or updates. And what we want to do is we want to ensure that these frequent updates do not break the working functionality. And suppose if we are trying to perform or execute these test cases manually after each change, then we would not be able to do that after each commit, because we are having a lot of them every day. So we need automation. But when we automate all the test cases, even if we have 100% test automation, it doesn't still mean that we are done. We can just go home and just relax. Of course, it doesn't work like that. So what we do is we continuously maintain the test code, because sometimes we are working in agile practice. We are working with agile practices, right? Sometimes we are having some change requests. So we are very welcoming for those kind of requests. But whenever we change the behaviors, or whenever we add some new functionality or change the existing functionality, we have to update our test code accordingly, because otherwise the test code would be covering the previous behavior. We just already update the behavior, the specification. And if we do not update the test code, we would not be covering the correct scope. So we should continuously maintain the test code. And apart from the changes or the change request on the requirements or the behaviors, sometimes we have to apply some fixes to our test code as well. We may have lots of different test smells, which may cause to some flakiness in the test code. In those kind of cases, we have to update our test code. We have to improve the strength or the accuracy of our test automation environment. So all these types of reasons may require some updates or some maintenance in our test code. And the problem here is, if we have lots of different repeated steps or code, then whenever we want to change something, we have to change a lot of things, a lot of classes. We have to touch lots of different code or the parts of the automation framework. For example, think about, we have an automation or implementation for login process. And whenever the development team changed the login algorithm, they just change providing the credentials to attaching a token. Then what we have to do is we have to change our implementation. And if we include this login automation to each our test spec file, then we have to change all of them. But if we implement this only in a single place, like we have a separate class, we have a helper class for that, in that case, we would just change the relevant class. And all the spec files using that method or function would be already automatically reflected whenever we apply our change. So I believe the biggest problem in test automation is the duplication, or the repeated or the duplicated code. But of course, since we are talking about problems, there should be some solutions as well. So Himanshu, what do you think? How can we overcome this problem, the duplication? How can we remove or at least minimize this duplication?
Yes, Mesut, thank you. You very well explained the problem in the test automation. So I'll be discussing the ways to overcome from code duplication. So code duplication in automation testing is a common problem that can lead to several issues. To avoid code duplication in automation testing, you should aim to create reusable code. One way to do this is to create a library of functions that can be used across multiple tests. Another way is to use inheritance, where common code is placed in a base class and that can be inherited by all tests that may need it. And also using the design pattern like the page object model can also help avoid code duplication. The POM is a pattern that separate the UI element, locators, and actions into two separate classes, that reducing code duplication and improving maintainability. So these are the ways we can overcome from the code duplication in automation testing, and we can maintain our code quality, scalability, and test maintainability. For the better understanding, I would request Mr. to please demonstrate an example of this to our audience.
Sure. So now we know the problem and we know the solution. We have to cope with the duplication. And if we somehow implement some reusable code, then we can overcome this problem. So to have a better understanding, I want to share an example and illustration in where we can better see the problem or the issue or the improvement room that we can have in our progress or the processes. So in this example, I have four different user profiles or four different test automation engineers who are trying to implement one very simple scenario. It's a very short and very simple scenario in which they are trying to find an element on the page, which is simply a button. And after locating this, they are just clicking this. There's one interaction. And after clicking that, they are making an assertion, which is just reading the label on the button, and they want to see if it is matching with the expected label or expect text on the button. So to implement this same scenario, this is a very short and simple scenario, and we see that there are lots of different ways to implement this. All these four profiles are following different approaches. Eventually, they are doing the same things. The test steps are the same, only one interaction and only one assertion. But even in this very small and very simple scenario, we can already see at least four different approaches. I'm sure there are still a lot of different approaches and implementation ways as well. But this example shows only four of them. So what we can see is they are trying to implement from scratch. They are trying to solve the same problem. There's a problem, we should implement some scenarios, and they are trying to implement this in their own ways from scratch. So there is, of course, a duplication. The code is duplicated, the steps are duplicated, and the efforts are also duplicated. They are all trying to implement from scratch. And again, we are talking about a very simple and very short scenario. Think about we are trying to solve different problems or difficult problems on complicated algorithms. In that case, of course, we would be spending too much time to solve the same problem again and again. So what should we do? What should be the or what could be the solution? Of course, if we had a solution which was already implemented to overcome this problem, and which was already implemented by some experts by following the best practices, the good coding practices, by avoiding anti-patterns, then of course it would be the best solution for providing these people. Because everyone can follow their own approach. I'm not saying this is totally unacceptable, but of course, there would be some risks. Since everyone is following a different approach, maybe some of them would be implementing in a way in which there are some anti-patterns. There would be some test flakiness or different test smells. So the proposal is just implement a solution in which already the code is reviewed carefully and all the anti-patterns are already eliminated, and feed this solution to all these people. So in that way, they can just call the relevant function or the method, which is already executing these test steps. So they would be just passing their arguments or the parameters to the call, to the methods or the functions, and they will not be implementing this solution from scratch. They would just have it from the testing service provided to them, and they would be just calling these functions. So what would be the benefits or the advantages of using this approach? First of all, everyone would be using the same functions, so we would be developing some standards. Everyone is using the same approach. Even if we have to change something, we can continuously maintain our test framework or our solution, which is provided to people as a service. And then since it would be already reviewed and developed by experts, and all the anti-patterns are removed carefully, then we would be already avoiding them and we would be following the best coding practices. And the duplication would be eliminated both in terms of the code duplication and the effort of duplication, a duplication of efforts wasted for the implementation. And of course, the same problems would not be tried to solve again and again each time by different people. And eventually, we could also include some different functionalities in this service. We are providing a solution to people, but in that framework, we can include different functionalities like the monitoring functions, or collecting some different metrics. So after people start using these functions or methods, they would be already able to perform their monitoring activities. So not only the functionality for executing test steps, but we can also share different or support people with different functionalities or features. Not only the execution of the test steps, but also the monitoring or some different dashboard, use of graphs, charts, queries, filters. We can include lots of different features as well. So now I believe what we have to do is very clear. So we have to implement a reusable service and we should provide to people. But Himanshu, how can we achieve this? Okay, we have to implement a solution or a service, but what kind of roadmap should we follow to achieve this implementation? What do you think about this?
Yes, thank you so much, Misut. So now we understood the problem and the ways to overcome from that. And we already talk about the targets. But what should be the roadmap to implement this? So first of all, we have to set the objective and the key results. We have to set it to check if our implementation results as per the objective and key result in the end or not. And then determine your testing requirements. This can include what types of testing you want to perform for your application. This will help you to identify the scope of testing services you need. And then in last, you need to prioritize the test. So it is the process to deciding which tests to execute first based on their importance and the potential impact on the software being tested. It is an essential part of testing as it helps to ensure that the most critical defects are identified and fixed, while less important defects can be deferred to later stages of testing or even to the future releases. So we generally follow this roadmap for the testing. So moving ahead, now we will see some key metrics that are commonly used in test automation that can be tracked to measure the success of software testing efforts. So we'll start from the test coverage that measures the percentage of the code that has been covered by tests. This metrics can help determine how much of the application has been tested and identify areas where additional testing is needed. Test execution time measures how long it takes to execute a set of tests. This metrics can help identify areas where tests are taking longer to execute and identify potential bottlenecks in the testing process. Test case effectiveness measures the percentage of the test cases that are successful. This metrics can help areas where tests are not effective and may need to be revised or rewritten. And the last is the customer satisfaction that measures the satisfaction of the end user. And I believe that is very, very important. This metric can help identify areas where the application may need improvement and highlight the success of the testing effort. So I believe these are the general key QA related metrics that commonly used. Mr. Could you walk us through how we can assess these metrics in the real world project?
Sure, sure. Especially the last one I really liked, the customer satisfaction, because I believe monitoring or measuring the quality is really very tough. Because how can you measure the quality and what are we aiming for? Like, of course, we are providing some products to our customers or end users, but we want to improve the confidence in our development to provide the best or the correct product to the customers. But how can we understand we are developing the high quality product? What kind of metrics can we use? Like suppose, let's say we are counting the number of bugs, but sometimes even products having 500 bugs can be a better product than a different product which has only 100 bugs. So this itself, the number of bugs we are having, this metric itself cannot be a good metric for us. So of course we have to do a comprehensive analysis. We have to collect lots of different metrics and we have to accumulate all of them and we have to do a comprehensive study. But of course, eventually our purpose should be ensuring that the customers or the end users are really satisfied by using our product. So what I did in my real project is, Himanshu, I guess fully aligned with the list that you shared. So of course, we went through lots of different metrics. But even if we sit together with all the audience here, and if we start writing some metrics, I'm sure we will write down maybe more than 100 metrics. There are dozens of them. So how can we select the best metrics, and how can we go with the best subset? So what we have done is, of course, we took two major categories as a reference. One is, again, improving the confidence that we are providing the best or the correct or the product with the highest quality. And on the other hand, the speed is very important. Like if you are providing a good solution, but it is taking ages, then of course the customers would be leaving, would be giving up, waiting for our product, right? So fast delivery and delivery with a high quality, these two terms are the fundamental two categories for us. So in terms of the first one, to improve the confidence, we decided to track the coverage metric because we want to ensure all the functionalities or all the specifications are covered by test cases. If some of them are still not tested by our test cases, then of course there would be a coverage gap, and we would not be sure that those specifications or the requirements or the behaviors which are not covered by test cases might have some issues. This is the first metric, the coverage. But the coverage again is not enough by itself, because even if we have 100 test coverage, I'm still not sure that all the tests are capable of finding issues. Maybe I have a lot of test cases, they are covering all the functionalities, but how about the capability of tests to find issues? So in that regard, we decided to track another metric, which is the escaped issues, which were not found by the test cases, which were reported after we let the code, the release candidate, to go in production. These two metrics were the most important ones in terms of the confidence or the quality of the product. On the other hand, in terms of the speed, we went through different metrics. One of them was the automation rate, because most of the cases, automated runs are faster than manual testing. So first of all, we measured the automation rate, and if we could automate some more tests, of course, we reserved some time to do this implementation or automation. And then, even if we have the similar concern, even if we have the 100% automation rate, it doesn't mean that it doesn't guarantee that tests are running very efficiently. We may still have some slowly running test cases. So the second metric that we have tracked is the execution duration. So in that regard, we did a time analysis, and we tried to understand if some of the test cases are running slowly or maybe not efficiently. So what we could do is just trying to understand if we somehow fasten the executions. Maybe we could do some parallelizations, or we could eliminate the maybe the redundant test steps. So we can do some improvements. And other than these two, of course, we would still have some flaky tests, which is one-time passing, one-time failing. So the false alarms, which is namely the failing tests, but failing due to not a product issue, but due to a test smell, which we have in our test automation environment. So we measured the percentage of false alarms, and then we tried to eliminate all the test flakiness and the falsely failing test cases. And of course, to do that, the test fix time is also very important, because if we are already aware that some test cases are flaky, but if we are not able to fix them in time, then maybe it means that our test case is not maintainable, right? Because Himanshu, you already shared us that the non-functional aspect is an important part of the quality. So we have the maintainability or the recoverability as well. So whenever we have a test failure, then we should be able to easily or shortly apply our fix. So these were the metrics that we have decided to track. And eventually, after doing a continuous maintenance, I guess we would be understanding what kind of, or getting some insights about the quality of our service. So I guess this was the end of first chapter, which was the definition of the problem, and then providing some solutions and proposals, and then the roadmap to achieve the solution, and deciding about some metrics to track and to have some understanding about the quality. So the next, after doing all these preparations, the next step would be starting the implementation. Okay, now we know what we should do. So let's do it. But first of all, of course, we should start in the correct direction. We should take some correct decisions to start our implementation. So first of all, we should know what kind of good practices we should follow, what kind of fundamentals we should already include in our test automation environment, and we are choosing the correct tools. So Himanshu, as a starting point, what kind of fundamentals we should consider, we should keep in mind to start our architecture or the test automation framework? What do you think? What should be the fundamentals in a good test automation framework?
Yes, Mesut. So for the implementation, we should like keep aware of the fundamental. So while building our test framework, a test automation framework is a set of guidelines, coding standards, and practices that provide an organized and systematic approach to automate software testing. Here are some of the fundamental of the test automation framework we will discuss. Starting from the modularity, the framework should be designed in a modular fashion to ensure that the code is reusable, maintainable, and scalable. The framework should be data driven, where the test data is separated from the test scripts. This approach makes it easier to maintain the test scripts and allows for the creation of multiple test cases using the same set of test data again and again. The framework should be robust enough to handle the exception and error gracefully. It should also have the error handling mechanism to make sure that the test results are accurate and reliable. Another fundamental is maintainability. It should be easy to maintain and update. The code should be organized, documented, and written in a way that makes it easy to understand and modify on the later stages. Integration, it should be framework should be able to integrate with other testing tools such as CI/CD tools, bug tracking tools, and test management tools. And the framework should have robust reporting mechanism as well that provide comprehensive reports on test results, including pass fail statuses, test coverage, and defect if any found. The framework should be flexible enough to handle the different types of tests, such as functional, performance, and security testing. So overall, a test automation framework should be designed to make test automation efficient, effective, and reliable. I believe by following these fundamentals, you can create a framework that provides a solid foundation for your test automation efforts. So moving ahead now, we will see how we can select best tools and kits for our automation framework. So selecting the best tools and kits for automation framework designing can be a daunting task, as there are numerous options available in the market. Here are some decision criteria that can be considered to select the best tools and kits for automation framework designing. Starting from functionality, the tools and kits should have the required functionality to support the automation framework, such as support for different type of testing, reporting, and integration with other tools. And it should be ease for use. It should be user friendly and easy to use even for the users with limited technical skills. This will help reduce the learning curve and increase the productivity. The tools and kits should be scalable, as the automation framework may need to be scaled up or down depending on the project's requirement. And the tools and kits should have the good support documentation available, including tutorials, user guides, community support. This will help in resolving issues and getting quick responses to queries. Talking about cost and compatibility, the tools and kits should be cost effective, as they can be significant investment for the project. The cost of the tools and kits should be balanced against the expected benefits and ROI. And the compatibility, the tools and kits should be compatible with the project's technology stakes, including the programming language, operating system, and other tools used in the project. And the last is performance. The tools and kits should be able to handle the workload and provide fast and reliable result. So by considering these decision criterias, you can select the best tools and kits for your automation framework designing and ensure that your automation efforts are efficient, effective, and successful in a long run. So Misut, how can you select the best tools? We just want to know your expertise in detail.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. This is a really important problem and a question that we should find the correct or the best answer. Because personally, I had a similar experience. I One of the tools were already decided before I joined to my project or the product, and after some time, I realized that the tool did not support all the needs that I have to execute or the complete. For example, in my personal experience. I'm living in Japan, so from the product owners, I learned that the at least half of the traffic is coming from iOS devices or the macOS devices. People here, the Japanese people, really love using these kind of operating systems. So, which means the UI testing, especially executing on the Safari browser, is very important for me. And the previously decided tool was not supporting the Safari execution for me. So as you told, if we go with a wrong tool, it might really cause some big or major issues for us in the future activities. So deciding the correct tool is very important. And I believe the list that you shared is really a good starting point. And we can use this as a decision criteria. So what I have done is in my project is I went through lots of different options, starting from the programming language. Then we can decide and we can study several options, and then eventually we can decide for the best option. And what I have done is to have a developer experience, I implemented the same scenario by using several options. And eventually, of course, I compared different performance criteria, like I measured the execution duration. For example, I implemented one test case, and then I start to execute it on a pipeline. Like I created a nightly job, and every night I executed this. And after some time, I took the average times, and I understood, for example, in Cypress, how much time do I need to execute this test case? Or in other options like Selenium, Test Cafe, Playwright, Nightwatch, each of them I collected the performance results. And of course, on top of the features that I have to include in my test automation environment, I took the other decision criteria like the performance or the user friendliness. It is also very important, like the ease of coding or ease of understanding the code. For example, whenever I'm implementing some test cases, if somehow, for example, I realized there was a big problem in some of the options since they are working in an asynchronous way, and since they do not support the use of await keyword, then after each step, I have to wrap and I have to somehow create some promises, and then I have to wait in the proper way. But of course, it is the way that I should follow. But of course, it was not that much straightforward. But in some other options, I realized that I can just use the await keyword. So the ease of coding was very important for me. And after I implement the same code, then the ease of understanding the code, the understandability is also very important. So eventually, I decided the tool that I will use in my test automation framework. I realize there are some questions in the chat, Himanshu. We can go over them. I guess the first one is reusable. You talk about inheritance. What is your opinion on a composition over inheritance to achieve reusability? Yeah, I can jump in. So I believe, yeah, we can use the inheritance or the code coming from the previous implementations, but sometimes we might have some issues to using the legacy code, because since we don't have the full 100% control or on the code that we are inheriting from the previous implementation, there might be some issues. So normally, I prefer to start from beginning to implement in a way that I want to follow. But of course, I believe this is a trade-off. Like if there's a huge implementation I have to do, and if there's already one solution in place, then I can go with it. It might have some issues, but if it will save me from wasting a lot of time to implement the same solution, then of course I can use inheritance. What do you think about this, Himanshu?
Yes, it is depending on your project and what is the like exact requirement, and it should be effective. Like it should make your framework effective and your test script effective enough to handle the
Definitely.
exception and all. There's a second question as well in the chat section. In addition to the tools that we decide, what is the importance of programming language that we decide to use in our test automation environment? Would you like to take it up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think this is another important question. For example, of course, we can choose the one of these tools or the frameworks, but how about the programming language? So maybe what we can do, not necessarily, but we can choose the same programming language which is used in the development teams that we are working together with. For example, in the QA teams, we will use one of the programming languages. So we can just take the one which is used in the development teams, which are we are working closely as a reference. So again, it is not necessarily we can choose another one, but choosing the same language would give us some advantages. For example, we can get some buy-in from the development teams. Whenever we want to do a collaboration, whenever we want to get a support from the development team, of course, if we are using the same language, it would be easier for us to get such a collaboration. So I believe this could be one reference. But of course, eventually it will depend on the team dynamics. Like if the team is totally familiar with another language, then we can start with that specific one, with which all the team is already very familiar to use it. Because otherwise there will be a learning curve. And if we do not have enough time to choose another one, then we can choose the one which the team is already very familiar with, to use it. So I guess we can continue. I don't see any other questions. So after using the framework, we should prepare our architecture. And I want to show a sample architecture or a general overview of how a test automation environment looks like. This is, of course, a very brief depiction. Of course, there can be lots of different components, or there can be lots of different ways to implement. But this is just an example architecture and a general overview of test automation environment. So what we do here is we have a workflow which is triggered by different actions. Like it can be a timely scheduled job. For example, if we have some nightly running jobs, then we can schedule it to every night 1 a.m., for example. And when it is time, the workflow would be triggered by the timely-based jobs, and it would already call the test runner, which will execute the test cases. This is one trigger, but of course, whenever we push a new commit or whenever we raise a new merge request, then those can be different triggers as well. But after the workflow is triggered, it is just calling the test runner. And what test runner is doing is just selecting the test cases which would be included in the current execution. Because we have lots of different test specs and test cases, but in each execution, we do not include all of them. Sometimes we are running a regression set, sometimes we are selecting a different subset. So the test runner scans all the test spec files and excludes the ones which we will not include in the current execution. After the tests are selected to be executed in the current execution, first of all, the test fixtures are running, which is the test code blocks running before each test case or before each suite. Those are the before all and before each fixtures. And similarly, we can have after each and after all as well. So this using these fixtures is already a great way to remove the duplication. For example, in each test case, if we have to first log in to our pages and then continue with the rest of the test steps, then we can just move them to the fixtures instead of including them inside the test spec files. And after that, the test itself is executed on the browser that we want to run. For example, the relevant driver or the browser itself is started by the test runner. And after the execution is completed on the selected browser, then the results are reported to the dashboards that we are using. So in this way, even after the execution, we would be already seeing all the execution details, including the screenshots or all the other evidences that we collect during the execution. So when we, after the execution, go to the dashboard and see the details, we will be able to do a maybe troubleshooting or an analysis. So this is what we will have. And after the implementation, this architecture we will be providing to people to let them run their test code with the solution that we provide. But of course, even after we finish the implementation, and if we share this solution to different people, of course, there will be some different actions that we will still continue to do. But first of all, let me explain in what ways this solution or testing as a service will help people, in what ways it will be beneficiary. So what I realized is when I was implementing personally my test executions or test implementations, I was spending a lot of time first to define or to figure out the locators, because sometimes there are some complex elements or components on the page. Sometimes it's very obvious. We can just investigate the page and we already have some classes or IDs or paths, but sometimes it is not that much easy. So I realized that sometimes I was really spending some time to decide about the best locator or the selector. Because I shared some examples on this slide. On the right-hand side, we can see there are lots of different ways to do the same action. We can choose any of them. They will all do the same test step. But of course, choosing the best one is the key problem here. Maybe some of them is not as efficient as the other options, or maybe some of them are more prone to errors. So I should select the correct implementation way. And apart from defining the locators or the selectors on the page, for implementing some algorithms which I need in my test implementation, I was spending some time. For example, sometimes I was waiting for responses and I was parsing the promises that I get from the responses to my queries, and I have to parse the relevant attribute or the field inside the whole response. So implementing all these steps was not a piece of cake. I was spending a lot of time. So what happened after I used this solution, which was shared to different people, I didn't have to implement my solution from scratch. So I didn't have to figure out all the locators, or I didn't have to implement all my test steps to parse the promises or just implement the queries and collecting the responses. All those functions were already inside the framework, which was provided as a testing as a service. So let me show you how it looks like quickly. So on the left-hand side, we can see a test case which was implemented from scratch. Everything is inside this test framework, test case. But in the right-hand side, we are using the test framework and we are just calling the function inside the framework, which was already shared as a service. So what we can see is we are just calling the relevant function by passing the attributes or the parameters that I want to pass to the function. So in this way, I guess it is much more understandable, and of course, it is saving a lot of effort and time to implement the same solution, which was already developed inside the test automation framework. So in this way, of course, when we provide this solution, we can help people and we can improve the efficiency. But of course, even after we finish implementation, I believe there will be still some continuous maintenance efforts, right, Himanshu? In what kind of situations we might need the continuous maintenance? And what do you think? What would be the importance of doing continuous maintenance?
Yes, Mesut. Continuous maintenance is like very, very important in test automation framework. And yes, we will discuss now importance of maintenance of a test automation service. So maintenance of a test automation service is crucial to ensure that the automated tests remain reliable and effective over the time. Here are some of the key reasons why maintenance of a test automation service is important. What if any changes in the application? So as the application evolves, the automated test may need to be updated to reflect these changes. Maintenance ensures that the automated tests remain relevant and effective. And what if changes in the test environment? The test environment may change over the time, such as upgrades to the operating system or browsers. So maintenance ensures that the automated test continues to function in the updated environment as well. Business requirement may also change over the time, and the automated test may need to update it to reflect these changes. So maintenance ensures that the automated tests remain aligned with the business requirements. And bug may be discovered in the automated tests themselves, and maintenance is required to fix these bugs to ensure that the tests remain reliable. Over the time, the automated test may become slow and inefficient as well. And because of the maintenance, we can optimize and increase the effectiveness of the performance and speed up that. So enhancement, if there is any enhancement in the project or the application, as new feature are added to the application, automated tests may need to be enhanced to the test these features. Maintenance is required to add this enhancement to the automation test. So overall maintenance of a test automation service is critical to ensure that the automated tests remain reliable and effective over the time, and enabling continuous delivery of high quality software. Now requesting Mesut, could you show us how we are measuring and monitoring our automation performance?
Of course, I will. But ideas, there's a new question. So it is saying, I've seen many articles against following page object model under Cypress. What is your thought on it? Should we follow page object model under Cypress or not? And if we think of maintainability, then page object model comes in mind. Yeah, I can take this up. I agree. Even in Cypress official site, they are not recommending to follow the page object model. So they are not saying that you cannot use, you can still use page object models, but it is not officially recommended because if you are using Selenium or any other framework, of course, a page object model is a strong candidate to follow a good coding practice. But most of the modern E2E test automation frameworks have their own solutions, so they are not officially recommending to use page object model. So my personal thought is, I agree. I'm not a huge fan of using page object models with Cypress or the like Playwright or any other modern E2E test automation framework. But of course, depending on our requirements, we can still use. Even with Cypress or Playwright, we can still use them, but normally we don't have to, because what in even in the official Cypress documentation, in official Cypress site, what they are saying is page object model is nothing but just only using some custom comments. So you can already implement your own custom comments and you can use them, because if you use the traditional page object model, you will have to deal with some returns returning from the classes or the page objects, and the traditional object-oriented approach is not fully aligned with the way of working in Cypress. You have to work in an asynchronous way. You have to wrap all your responses, and you have to create a lot of promises. So I believe you can go with without using page object models. Then how to better handle locators under Cypress and Playwright. So you can basically create a class to define all your locators, and you can define them as normal variables. You don't have to define them under an object. You just define them as a variable and use them in a lot of different test spec files. So I'll continue, but if you have more questions, please still share them in the chat. These are great questions, so thanks for the contribution and the interactions. So I'll continue, but of course we can come back to this discussion at the end as well. So Himanshu, you asked me how we can measure the success, right? Because previously I just shared that I promised that this solution would be beneficial for all of us, and it can reduce the implementation efforts and time that we will spend. So how I measured this is I put some labels and some annotations on some tasks or tickets in our issue tracking system. For example, I put a test automation label, and after doing that, I pulled all the tasks. I exported all of them in our issue tracking system, and I measured the duration which we need to complete the progress. Like I first take the status transition from new to in progress, and then from in progress to complete. So after checking these two timestamps, I could measure the time that I need to complete this test automation tasks. And I had two categories: the ones which are implemented without using the testing as a service, and with using the testing as a service. So I realized for the ones which are not using this solution, the shared solution, we're taking uh, 2 hours in average for defining the locator classes and 3 hours for the implementation of the rest of the classes or the implementation. So it was 5 hours in average. But after starting using the testing as a service, I realized that the average time that we need to complete these tasks was only 30 minutes. So we can already see a great advantage and a great contribution from using this testing as a service. But of course, dealing with this kind of metrics and pure data, raw data is not easy because you have to read all the numbers and the values. They are great. They are telling a lot of information to us. But there is one more thing that we can do, which is transforming all this raw data into some monitoring dashboards. In this way, we would be having lots of different visuals, and in this way, it would be even straightforward to understand what's going on. We can see all the trends or the line charts or all the distributions. And in this way, it would be really very convenient to make our monitoring activities. So just as an example, I will share a couple of monitoring dashboards which we can create on lots of different platforms. We can develop our own platform, or we can use any of those free monitoring platforms. So just as an example, I will show a few of them. And again, in this way, it would be much more visual and convenient to understand what is happening in our environments. We can collect lots of different metrics, and we can see all the distribution and the charts, like if they are increasing or decreasing in time, or if they are stable. It would be very easy and complete our monitoring activities. So I guess this was the last point that I want to share. Himanshu, I believe we already discussed a lot of things, and we briefly discussed about the advantages of testing as a service, how it can help people to boost their implementation efficiency and reducing the duplication and the waste of efforts and waste of time. Maybe it is a good point to wrap up and to make a summary. What do you think?
Yes, Mesut, very well explained. So, what we have observed, we observed in our case, it was the code duplication, and we learned how we can overcome with that. Requirements, how can we analyze the requirement, and based on that, we need to select the best tools and kits for our test framework, and the QA related metrics and its implementations, which are needed to evaluate quality of test automation. And for that, we need a good team, as it is a collaborative effort that requires the involvement of multiple teams member to ensure its success. Monitoring in test automation refer to the process of tracking and analyzing the execution of automated tests to identify any issues or defect in the application being tested. Misut very well explained about how monitoring helps to evaluate good test automation with an example already. And in the last, continuous maintenance, it is the process of updating and modifying automated test scripts and the automation framework to keep them up to date to ensure their continued relevance to the application being tested. So I believe that's what we discussed in today's session. I hope thank you for being an amazing audience throughout this session. But before we wrap up, I would love to have your queries. please share your question in the message section and we will try to answer them all one at a time.
Yes, please do not hesitate to share any type of questions. There is no stupid question. And not necessarily questions like if you have any feedback or comments about this, what are
You
your
can also
thoughts about
share.
this? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so there is a question in the chat box. How can test ops improve the testing process and ensure the delivery of high quality software? So I'll take it up. So test op is a methodology that combines software testing with DevOps practices. It involves integrating testing into the software development lifecycle by automating testing process, providing real-time feedback, and enabling continuous improvement. TestOps is based on the principle of collaboration between testers, developers, and operations teams to ensure that the software is tested truly and consistently throughout the SDLC. It helps to ensure that everyone is working toward the same goal of delivering the high quality software. By embracing test ops, organizations can achieve faster time to market, reduce the risk of defect, and deliver software that meets the user expectation. So there is another question: how can business select the right testing as a service provider for their business? So choosing the right provider can be a crucial decision for businesses as it directly affect the quality of their software product. So before selecting a provider, define your specific testing requirements, identify the types of testing you need, such as functional testing, performance testing, security testing, etc., and the tools or framework you would like to use. And you can evaluate the provider's expertise in testing area you require, check their certification, trainings, and the experience in using the latest testing tools. You can also consider the scalability. Ensure that the provider can scale their services to accommodate your needs as your software product evolves over the time. Also, you can ensure that the provider follows the necessary security protocols and compliances uh, to protect your data and meet the regulatory requirements. And yes, they should have robust quality assurance process to ensure the accuracy and completeness of their testing. So I believe by considering these factors, businesses can select right testing as a service provider that meets their specific testing needs and ensures the quality of their software products.
Yeah, so I think this could be a very good guideline to select the best provider. But I believe to these kind of questions, the best answer is always it depends. It will
It depends.
depend on the requirements you have, right? Because you have to analyze what kind of requirements you have, and you can select the best provider upon those requirements. But of course, you shared a very good guideline to do this decision. So going over these criteria, you can find the best provider, I guess. There's another question. How
Yeah,
can
there's
we
another.
how
Yeah.
can how we can better handle continuous improvement and maintenance of test scripts when you have back-to-back releases under Agile? So yeah, I can take this up. I think it's a very important challenge. And I believe most of us are facing this problem because there's a time constraint, there's a time pressure, and we don't have too much time to maintain our test cases. We have to complete our executions, and then we have some other tasks, we have some other releases to complete. But what we should do is we should improve the communication between the teams, and we should reduce the silos in this way, because this is the challenge in Agile. We are not having too much time, too loose time. We have a very strict time, and we should use this time very efficiently. Whenever the development activities start, we should in the meantime can start our test preparations. And whenever they have a behavior update or change, then we can start our behaviors as well. Because why do we need some test maintenance? Because most probably some of the tests are broken, right? And why? They're not broken by themselves. Someone applied some changes. And if we know, if we are aware some changes are planned in advance, then we would have some time to do that. So I believe the key solution would be here is improving the communication, already being aware of what is planned, what kind of changes are planned on the behaviors or the specifications. So in this time, since we already know in advance, we would have more time. By the way, still there might be a time concern, so there might be a technical debt. But whenever we have a time to do that, of course, we can go over all the technical debt we have. And Himanshu, you shared and the importance of the priority. So we may have lots of different tasks, but of course we can start from the highest priority. Like if one issue is affecting a lot of test cases, first we can start with that one, and then we can continue with the rest. So I guess in that regard, prioritization is very important.
Yes, perfectly answered. I can also relate with this question, and I wanted to answer you. You have already experience in this field, and back-to-back releases like sometime hectic, and some for that like maintenance is very very important.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So I believe we can wrap it up. We are out of time already. Uh, Amazing questions. I feel Miss would have enjoyed this session. With that, we would like to end today's session. Thank you all for giving us your valuable time. We hope it was an insightful spend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Himanshu and Misut. Misut, thank you so much for joining us in for this collaborative influencers
My,
webinar. Seriously, it was very nice collaborating with you. We really learned a lot being a non-testing, from side. I learned a lot from you. Thanks for all the patience you had with us all this time. And Himanshu, thank you too, for taking out time and being actively participant of this new series. Thank you so much, both of you, and I hope everyone will take influence from Himanshu and be an active participant for the same. Thanks,
thanks
Thank you
for
so
Masood.
much, Hima.
thanks
Hope
for
to connect.
hosting me. It was my
Hope to
pleasure.
connect with you soon again, with some more ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I guess there are
Thank you
some
so
more
much.
questions, but since we don't have enough time, you can find me on LinkedIn or any other platform, so you can share your questions to me.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.